Welcome to the Naavik Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Naavik's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.naavik.co. This episode is brought to you by Heroic Labs, which powers some of the world's biggest games with its Heroic game stack. Its composable products are Nakama, the open source backend game server, Hero, the game development framework for all your live service game features, including the complexity of managing offline mode, Satori, the world-class live ops product for maximizing monetization and retention, and lastly, the Heroic Cloud to provide massive scalability. After nearly 10 years of operation, thousands of studios trust Heroic Labs to help them focus on their games and not worry about game tech or scaling for success. To learn more and reach out, make sure to visit heroiclabs.com or check out the link in the show notes. Now, let's jump into the episode.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Devin Becker, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Liam Wiltshire, the GM of Tebex. Tebex helps game studios and game servers better monetize through direct-to-customer compliance, fraud protection, and a whole lot more. So today we're going to discuss some of the realities of direct-to-customer monetization across multiple platforms. But just to start things off here, could you go over your background and the origins of Tebex, along with its important relationship with Overwolf?
Sure. Hi, Devin. Thanks for having me. So yeah, my name's Liam, and I'm the interim GM at Tebex. I've actually been with Tebex for just over 9 years. So started at the founder's kitchen table, literally just kind of the two of us. It was crazy times. It's very, very different now, obviously. Initially started as a CTO, so joined to lead the technical side of the business. So did that for a while, and then shifted more into kind of the operations and payments side of the business. And then, like I said, more recently into the GM role. So Tebex's history is super interesting. We actually started, for people that are old enough to remember, as Bycraft, which solved a really simple but very real problem that UGC creators running servers in Minecraft, the likes of Hypixel and Mineplex back then, they had these brilliant servers and this amazing content, and people were coming back and people were playing Minecraft for these experiences, but they needed a way to fund these servers. They needed a way to accept money that was kind of safe and global and low friction and didn't involve them having to worry about it. And that's how we started. So it was, Bycraft, it was very Minecraft specific. We then realized that this same problem existed on other games that had servers, the likes of Rust and Ark and Garry's-Mod, etc. All these things around payments and chargebacks and tax and fraud. None of that should sit on a hobbyist or a small team, right? Really good example of that was actually War Bandits, still a very popular server in the Rust community. We were able to save them, I think it's like over 1,000 hours by taking all that responsibility for like chargebacks and tax and all that stuff. So they can spend the time building their brilliant server and their amazing experiences. The way that then continued to progress is that we started to realize, well, hold on, this isn't just a game server thing, right? This isn't unique to servers. This happens across all UGC, modding, apps, overlays, and also with games themselves, in-game purchases and studios and mobile games and cross-platform and everything else. So, as you mentioned, we were actually acquired by Overwolf, just coming up for 4 years ago. It'll be 4 years in February, in fact. And they specialize in UGC. They are like the UGC people creating this new profession, this new guild of creators. And the way that Tebex and Overwolf work really well is this kind of free UGC, kind of ad-supported mods and apps, and Tebex's kind of premium UGC support just like really work together so nicely. And between both sides, the distribution and the tooling and the ad network on the Overwolf side, and then this entire monetization stack and growth engine that Tebex has, it just means that we can support kind of studios that are doing games as a platform, UGC creators, kind of the whole range across proper D2C ecosystems.
Well, it does seem appropriate that of all genres to start with to help get money that they need to survive. Survival games seems very, very appropriate. So
it works really well.
Yeah, good on you guys. I mean, now that you've had a chance to grow a bit since like some of those early days as well, like what kind of customers do you guys generally work with in terms of like the direct customer monetization, like across different platforms, different genres, things like that? Just give a better idea of who you work with usually.
For sure. And I think the interesting thing is that because of our UGC background, we had this really strong cross-platform approach. We've worked in all games from Ark to Rust to Minecraft to GTA and so on. And it means that we're very at home both on desktop and mobile. I'm experiencing UGC around moderation, around content and safety. IP compliance means we're really well placed to support games as a platform. And that's something that I'm loving. So games as a platform, we can talk about it a bit more, I'm sure. But, from the early days that it was very much like desktop only, and that's kind of where it was, we are seeing it grow. And I'm really excited for 2026. I think we're really going to see an explosion of, games as a platform across mobile and console and PC. And that's something that we're really, really really excited for. So between private servers, mod authors, the premium mods in Ark Survival Ascended, Tebex is the kind of underlying kind of payments infrastructure that powers that. We try and stay out of the spotlight as much as we can. That's not we're not here to be the heroes, right?
Just today.
The Ninja Turtles and the Power Rangers, they're the heroes in more ways than one, I guess. But we're not here to be that. We try and sit behind the scenes. But those premium mods, PC first studios, mobile studios such as Boombit, etc. We do everything from one creator with a laptop all the way up to kind of enterprise studios, and we're really proud to work with such a range.
Well, I gotta imagine then you guys, having already worked with GTA servers before, are really looking forward to that release, as well as from what I'd seen in sort of like leaks and other things potentially coming out from the studios, they were definitely more interested, having acquired sort of the 5M developers, like looking at what they might be doing more broadly around mods to actually support them directly with their own launchers, things like that. A bit of a tangent, but I just wanted to mention that does seem like a lot of exciting potential future for what you guys are doing. But just kind of getting more into the details, how does this sort of creator economy work, like with private servers or just mods in general, like differ fundamentally from like mobile studios or even PC studios that are like actual game studios, and that whole direct to customer like monetization experience?
Yeah, I suppose there's a bit of a false assumption that I'm going to challenge a little bit. I don't want to say the host. Don't want to challenge the host too much, but I'm going to. The like creator economies are seen as this one thing, and I think that's kind of the thing that we've seen over the last kind of decade and a half, is that even within creator economies, you've got lots of different areas, right? So a game like Hypixel, I kind of named them at the beginning. They've got a Guinness World Record for concurrency, and it was something like 150,000 concurrent players. Now, that's the scale of many games. There are games that don't have 150,000 concurrent players. So the way you have to kind of think and approach an economy like that is, finely balanced economy, like true economies, in-game economies, become very, very difficult. A lot of these studios and Hypixel is one, they want to avoid pay to win. They don't want to be a pay to win server. That's not what they do. So working out what is going to be interesting to players and what is going to get players kind of engaged and enthused, but isn't just pay to win, is a really big thing. And obviously that is a challenge that also crosses over to a lot of mobile games and a lot of desktop games. But at the same time, like Hypixel, massive concurrent players, but one of their core gameplay elements are these mini games, which are much more like mobile because they are fast paced. They're like a short game session. You go in, it might be a 5-minute game and you're out again. Then you go into another one, you play that game and you're out again. So it's much more like that kind of quick, short life cycle gaming session that we tend to see on mobile. So even within one server, you've got kind of both ends of the spectrum. You've got other servers. So on the other end, you have things like GTA and roleplay servers. Now they are very much, you're investing your time into that. It's total immersion. It's very much I am spending hours and hours of my life in this one scenario, this one piece of gameplay. So we then mix and match different areas based on that experience. Modding, on the other hand, very, very different. That's more like selling a core game mode. So that's much less like mobile because we're selling an individual mod that's it enhances the experience. So yeah, it really is a mix. You have long sessions of big carts, which are very different to mobile. You will have players that will buy multiple items in one go. So if you're on an RP server and you want some new clothes for your character and you're maybe changing careers in game, you're going to be buying both of those at the same time. So you're building a cart and you're checking out. That is obviously something that you're never going to see really on mobile. Mobile, it's very much, I'm buying this thing, get through as quickly as possible, get back into the game. I think the key takeaway, though, out of all of this is that for private servers, D2C is native and web stores are native. Like, we've been doing this for years. Servers like Hypixel, servers like, or creators like Gabs, servers like UKRP have had web stores for, over a decade in some cases. Whereas with mobile, it's very much a new thing. And it's about that behavior shift that we're having to retrain players that this is the new normal. And I think that's the biggest difference.
Right, because you're not trying to get around the payment rails that were sort of enforced for a while. One thing you brought up that made me wonder around pay to win and things like that, where are you guys ever looking at, for example, like a Roblox design patterns for what people are doing for, because there's a variety of things that it's individual creators coming up with their own sort of IAP sort of schemes within Roblox that use the native currency, as opposed to being like a typical cash IAP system. But you guys look for those patterns because it is sort of like it suits to an extent what you guys are doing. And as a second part of that, are you guys looking at the Fortnite edition of IAP and seeing about how you can work that into your systems, or at least look at it?
Yeah, I think that the wider pattern and the wider thing that's interesting around, like you said, like the Roblox model, where it's kind of almost like a cashless or a fiatless, I suppose is more accurate, ecosystem, is the ability to keep kind of money within the ecosystem for longer, particularly from a like UGC angle, where for us, for example, a lot of our creators are also customers. And you'll find this across a lot. If you've got games as a platform where you can run experiences and you can also play other people's experiences, it is that kind of, it's not like you're an either or. You're not a creator or a player. You are both, which is super exciting. And this is one of the things that I love, right? This is why I'm so excited for games as a platform, because it is making this so much more possible. But therefore, from a commercial concept, one of the really exciting things is to be able to keep kind of that money in the ecosystem. So I buy, virtual currency for a particular game. I might buy a script. Let's say I'm building an experience, but I'm not a brilliant scripter. I might buy a script that does something that I want in my game. So I buy that from someone who's produced a script within like this game's marketplace, within this game's economy. I use that in my game. I then receive currency for producing, in this game. So someone's then playing my experience and they're buying content. So I receive that. I then might want to upgrade my game. Might want to do more with it. And so I may then buy a 3D model to add to my game as a new character or whatever else. And you can kind of keep it within the ecosystem, which is great for the studios, because at the end of the day, someone's going to take that cut. For each transaction, someone's taking the cut. And I would much rather the studio takes that cut than the bank. That's, some people might not be too happy with that, but that's my view. I'd much rather a game studio be able to receive an extra kind of 1% on the transaction or whatever than, JPM taking their piece or whoever it might be. So that for me is the really exciting thing. And that's the trend I think we're going to see, is that there'll be this concerted effort to be like, let's introduce spend back. Let's kind of, have secular kind of economy flows, because it is better around. It means, pricing can be a little bit low because it's cheaper to process these payments. It means that players kind of feel invested in the platform and in the entire economy, from like a marketplace to the games to, whatever else. And I genuinely think it's a way that everybody wins.
Nice. Well, hopefully that continues to be the case, because there's definitely a lot of effort put in that direction.
Yeah, for sure.
You touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to dive deeper into the aspects of the player relationship. So you mentioned obviously like there's not the nativity of the payment rails on PC, and even on like some of these other platforms where it's technically you pay into, say, buy Roblox or something, but then you're spending that and it has its own flow that's not part of necessarily go payment rails that are built into that. But how does the overall player relationship work when you're kind of, you talk about not having to retrain people and things like that necessarily. So then how does it work across that? Like, you also have like the lack of, say, maybe frequency of play or lack of notifications, those things that you get from mobile that you have in addition to the payment rails. Just like how broadly, what do you see across?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess this is where, and this is something that I think mobile studios can definitely learn from D2C, because D2C has always been about owning that relationship. There is a real desire to support that community, a real, motivation to be like, I am part, I identify as part of, the Hypixel community. I identify as part of the War Bandits community. I identify as part of, some of these communities. I mean, like I said, Hypixel has got players that have been playing on that server for over a decade. There is that real, dedication and loyalty, I guess, and that's the word I was looking for. And that's something that these games have built over time. And they do have, like, while you're in the game, you will get little reminders now and again. It'd be quite common to say, hey, so-and-so's purchased, this little pet that follows them around. Get yours and the link to the store. Or, a little pop-up that says, hey, we're going to be running a Black Friday promotion. We're going to be running, a Christmas promotion, whatever else. You will still have those kind of prompts and those reminders that, hey, the store is there and there is really great value to be had. But because of that loyalty and that kind of that owning of the relationship, and that's what really we're talking about. It's building that kind of player loyalty, building that, we want to be part of this community and be part of this game and support, the creators of this content, right? And that's what kind of control of the player relationship really means. And I think that's something that, is something that mobile studios can learn, because we know, and I know I'm very fickle when it comes to mobile. If I know I've got a 12-hour flight somewhere, I'll be like, right, what games can I download? They're going to be offline games that will keep me occupying for maybe half an hour each. And I'll download 6 games, but there's very little loyalty there. And so I'm guilty of it as well. And I'm sure we all are to varying degrees. But this is the exciting thing, that by taking more ownership of that relationship and having more direct interaction with the players, rather than it being via this faceless algorithm, I suppose, you can start to build that loyalty and that kind of sense of belonging to a wider community, which then naturally players go, well, I want to support these games. I love this game. This is something I want to support. I'm going to see what's on the store. I'm going to check out their Black Friday sales. I'm going to, engage with the wider community. Maybe we'll talk on, maybe there's a Discord or a forum if you're of a certain age like myself, whatever that might be. And so that's what control of the player relationship really means, is building that kind of brand loyalty almost. And that's something that I think, mobile and PC studios to a degree can definitely learn from kind of the more old school UGC.
Yeah, it's funny too, because you're comparing mobile and PC and stuff like that to there. You don't necessarily, you mentioned the loyalty issue, and it's like, well, you don't really have that same style of user acquisition on PC and mods that you do for mobile, which might also lead to a sort of disloyal relationship that sort of, whatever, goes, as opposed to the word of mouth or whatever else is generally leading to people joining these communities. It I think has a little bit more being prepared to be engaged with the community, as opposed to just, hey, I saw an ad in another mobile game that made me download this mobile game, which doesn't even play like the ad.
Well, I mean, that is true. And like I said, definitely things that we can learn. But it's an interesting thing, because one of the other ways that I know, particularly kind of PC and cross-platform games as well, kind of build that loyalty, is obviously around kind of influencers and streamers. But like my children, for example, and it's a kind of a personal example, definitely my son plays more on mobile than he plays kind of on PC. Because he plays it like when he's on the bus to school or he's just out or whatever. And yet, when he's on YouTube or when he's on Twitch and he's watching, it's all PC streamers. And it might be Roblox, it might be Minecraft, it might be, whatever else it might be. But it's going to be, it's predominantly kind of PC or sometimes console, but mainly PC based games, kind of PC streamers. So but it's not building awareness and loyalty again for the mobile games, right? So I think this is where there's that shift I think we will see, and I think some of that is probably the economics of a mobile game, losing such a big slice for such a long time. It makes some of that, all the margins get that much thinner. The cost of engaging with some of these influencers becomes higher. And I do think we're going to start to see that now that you're going to have more visibility, more, like I said, direct relationships. There will be genuine long-term value. It's not, we just need to get, we want to get a player, a purchase from this player now because they'll be going to be playing something else next week. It's actually, we want this player to be playing our game for the next year, the next 2 years. The kind of the lifetime value of that player is now suddenly very, very different, and it changes the whole complexity of the thing, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say that, like a lot more long tail LTV as opposed to like, okay, we've got maybe like a 3-month LTV for most players at most. Obviously, like, a lot of mobile games don't last nearly as long as PC games. There's definitely some exceptions, as most of the top 20 charts usually show, but PC definitely, I mean, the people are still playing Counter-Strike, even though it's only had, updates here and there. So it's definitely an interesting, different environment. But, speaking of some of the stuff you're talking about with mobile, but also broadening out both across the two different platforms, what have you seen change more recently as a result of a lot of these different sort of legal decisions, many of them involving Epic, especially, but also, like there's the EU legislation stuff, and just in general, like the regulatory and legal environment has changed quite a bit. But doesn't just affect mobile, right? This is definitely something that should be affecting you guys. I mean, especially since Epic isn't exactly a mobile first company, right? Like, so it definitely is trying to bring people towards where they are on PC as well. So what are you kind of seeing across all of that?
Absolutely. I think you're right. I think, this whole concept that platforms, and obviously right now we're looking at kind of Google and Apple, but platforms more generally are being forced towards greater openness. Now, for me, that is the exciting thing. Is like, I know we talk a lot about, hey, the savings on fees, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and that's super important. Like, I'm not going to downplay that. As I mentioned, it changes the economics of a lot of the other things that we can do. But it really comes back to by forcing that greater openness and that studio choice, we are going to see, as I said, more control of the player relationship. But it also means that there's more creative control. So one of the things right now is, if you're producing a mobile game and you want it to obviously list highly in the Google store, and you're reliant on that for your survival, you therefore do kind of have to a degree build the game that is going to show up in the search. I mean, Google Play SEO is its whole entire thing, right? And that's a whole heap of stuff that I've looked at and glad I don't have to get involved in that, honestly. But it is, it's this whole thing. And being able to actually own that relationship and own your community and be like, hey, this is actually the game we've wanted to make for years. And now that we're not beholden to having to rank highly in the results or having to be found for searches or whatever it might be, this is the game that we've wanted to make for you guys forever. And you've got your loyal player base, your loyal fan base, and you can do that. And that creative control, I think, is super exciting. But I think it also goes the same for PC. We are seeing new distribution channels. Steam is obviously still very, very important. I think it's going to be important forever. 100%. I don't, myself personally, I don't want to go back to the time when I had like 20 CD wallets full of CDs, and you're trying to find the right one, and then it's scratched and it doesn't work. Or
5 different publisher-specific platforms.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're of a certain age, you remember that stuff. You go, actually, maybe we're it's quite good now, right? But at the end of the day, we are seeing these different kind of the distribution mechanisms, and we are seeing more games that are kind of self-publishing and self-distributing. Obviously we've had announcements very recently, obviously the repurchase of Hightail, and kind of their plans seem to be from what I've seen is it's going to be they're going to have their own launcher, and they're going to have their own kind of distribution, which gives them the control to build the game they want to build, right? And again, that's a great example of having control of that relationship, because they have such a loyal fan base through the UGC, and this is where those things tie so nicely together, that they have this UGC kind of loyal fan base that they're going to be interested in Hightail when it comes out. You just know it's going to happen, and that is a classic example of when you make these platforms open up and give more power back to the studios, these are the things that are possible. We're going to see, I think, a lot more player-first economies. Studios own the IP, and that's great. But being able to then open up that IP to your community and be like, hey, create some cool stuff with this. That's the thing that excites me. My first game, the game that I played most is Ark. I play with my wife. We have our server with some friends on it as well. It's great. But the thing we always do is the vanilla Ark game is great. But whenever we start a new map, the first thing we do is make sure we've got the right mods installed, make sure we've got the Power Ranger skins installed, make sure we've got whatever. And being able to say, this is the economy, this is the IP that we've got, this is almost like an engine, like a Roblox type. Here's a game engine, produce really cool stuff with it is so exciting. And obviously we've seen it on PC for a long time. I think we are going to see with this continuing opening up that it becomes easier because rewarding content creators is right. At the end of the day, they are spending their time and their passion and making these games more relevant. Again, Minecraft, a brilliant example. People still buy Minecraft more than a decade after its launch. And that is predominantly due to these amazing experiences of UGC. So it is 100% right that these creators should be rewarded for that. And we should create this guild of creators that Overwolf is doing. But we want studios to win as well, because ultimately it is their IP. So I think this is something that the opening up of these platforms makes that a lot easier to achieve, that the different players can all have their piece. And I think we're going to see a lot of this being taken advantage of, and a lot of these games as a platform opening up over the next couple of years because of it.
Nice. I mean, definitely a very optimistic take, and hopefully something that continues to progress without legislation blocking it and instead supporting it. But a bit of a curveball.
It might take some time, but we'll get there.
Yeah. I mean, 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of tends to be the way it works. But I do appreciate Epic at least spending some of that Fortnite money to help push that forward, regardless of what their motives actually are.
I think we all owe them a Christmas present.
Yeah, just go buy some Fortnite skins, call it a day. But I based off something you said, I want to throw a little bit of a curveball at you, which is you're talking about distribution and mentioning Steam and stuff like that. With Steam Deck getting some decent traction and the Steam sort of like the GameCube, as people like to call it, all the sort of platforms they're trying to introduce and expand that out. Have you guys looked at that? As obviously, you're trying to support Steam games, and that is a platform instead of Windows. You're looking, or even Mac, you're looking at this sort of Linux-based system. And Steam Deck's been out for a little while, so there's some time to process it. Obviously, the other stuff isn't out yet. Have you guys looked at that, seen how you could maybe support working on that platform, or is it just hey, it's pretty plug and play? Despite being a Linux-based system, we could support it pretty easily because it's not exactly the normal thing you'd be dealing with.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit. It's not something that we've spent a huge amount of time looking at, kind of in our kind of environment. But with it being kind of Linux based, and it's more even the Steam Deck is more akin to a kind of miniature PC than like a traditional console. I mean, this is the conversation about the Steam GameCube, right? That they're saying it's going to be seen as a PC almost. It's probably going to be priced like a PC. It's not to be considered in the same realm as a console. And so that does give a lot of flexibility around kind of web browsers and all of these things that a lot of the same patterns that we've used in the past do kind of cross over. That said, the other thing that I think a lot of games and a lot of kind of merchant record and monetization platforms like Tebex are looking at is how can we remove as much distraction from the game as possible. Anytime, we always say that anytime someone is spent paying, they're not playing. So how can we keep cutting it down? How can we keep reducing that? So kind of in-game web shops is something that we've spent a lot of time working on, both actually in the UGC space. So we're currently exploring ways to make that possible within UGC. We've done it for years and years within Minecraft. Now, for Minecraft, you still have to go outside to make the final payment, but you can browse and add your items to your cart and do all that in-game and just go out to make the payment. We're exploring it for other games that we support. And we're working on that exact same pattern with some of the mobile and desktop studios that we work with. So actually removing as much of that kind of out of game experience as possible, is something that is going to be important. Obviously, the challenge on mobile is that you can kind of do it. It's different degrees of what you're allowed to do, right? And this is, one of the big challenges right now for mobile is, the law in Japan, which is obviously changing in the next day or two, is different from the law in Europe, is different from the law in the US, which is kind of like, who really knows? And and then other, like Brazil is currently looking at it, but they've not made any decisions yet. And we've got internally this massive spreadsheet of this is the current state of play right now for all these countries. And we end up having to update it like every single day to keep on top of it because it is truly insane. So that's a big part of the challenge is, you can remove the friction in some places. In some places, in other countries, the friction is still there, right? So I think that's I know kind of veered off topic slightly, but the same challenges exist that like on a Steam Deck, it is small screen. Do you kind of want to try and go through the purchase experience, or do you leverage things like, with Tebex, we have safe payment methods. So you can save your card, you can save your PayPal account, you can save your Naavik account. If you've got if you're South Korean, you've got South Korean Naavik wallet. You can save all these things against yourself. So we're again exploring ways of going, well, okay, if you've got the in-game browser and we already know the payment method, can we just do a simple thing like where maybe they get text a one-time password so that, so we know that they've authorized it. They get a text with a one-time password, they key that in-game, and then the purchase is done. And they don't need to leave the game at all. So these, I think, the things that are more, it's like across the board, how can we reduce friction? How can we reduce out of game time? Which is then going to benefit Steam Decks. It's going to benefit any type of handheld, whether that's mobile, whether that's, whatever, but also, PC and UGC as well.
Well, I'd appreciate that because the Steam purchase flow is a ridiculous number of steps already. Like, I don't think it would be hard for you to beat Steam's payment rails because it's seriously like 6 or 7 steps if you're paying via PayPal and they're just to purchase like a $5 item in a game. So should be a low bar to go over.
I'll let you know as soon as we're there.
Yeah, definitely. No, I'm a Steam Deck user, so I will definitely look forward to that. Someone who owned a Steam Link and the original controller and all that. I would love to see what you do with those payment flows.
Awesome.
But we did a release. Naavik released a deep dive recently in the direct to customer payments and kind of the future of that. And it's really interesting to look at one aspect that I wanted to kind of dig into your thoughts on, which is this sort of idea of moving from these really simplistic web shops to this more full e-commerce experience where it's not just, you're just basically replicating the IAP screen onto a web browser. You're actually trying to build a full on e-commerce site with shopping carts and loyalty programs. I mean, obviously there's a little bit of loyalty program stuff already, but it could be a bit more robust. It could be a bit more like a real web store. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Like, is that stuff you guys are working on? Stuff you've explored? Like, what are overall thoughts there?
Yeah, so it's something that we definitely do kind of think about a lot. So one of the things that we see is purchasing, and maybe it's an age thing as well. I think it depends on the age demographic of your players. But purchasing on PC, we do see the average spend is quite a bit higher. I know we've shared this with you guys recently, but it's it's a good kind of 10 or so percent higher than on mobile. Now, for me, again, I'm a certain age, that seems quite obvious. Like if I'm buying flight tickets, I very rarely buy them on my phone. I will still go to my laptop to buy or a tablet at least to buy tickets for flights and things because I'm like, I don't know, it's a thing. But I think there is a greater element of trust when you're kind of buying from a web browser experience or a true web shop experience, right? As opposed to a quick in-game kind of one bam, thank you, ma'am sort of journey, right? So a lot of what we're seeing and a lot of what we think about is how you make that kind of web shop experience second nature. And this is the thing, right? It's we want to, as I mentioned at the beginning, retrain players to be like, this is the normal. Much like on UGC where people go, well, of course you've got a web shop. Of course that's just normal. Having that experience where you go, actually, you're going to have a curated shopping experience, but it's not just going to be the quick buy, pay, back in the game kind of thing, is important. And a lot of the mechanics that we're seeing kind of support that. So a great example is obviously you talked about loyalty programs, and that's great kind of once you're used to shopping. But actually, how do you train someone to visit the web shop in the first place? And this is where one of the things that we advocate for a lot is to move the like the daily perks. And a lot of mobile games have this mechanic, right? Where you time you log in, you get 100 coins, you get 150 points on day 2, you get some gems on day 3, you get, a bundle box on day 4, whatever it might be. And actually, one of the things we advocate for is moving that to the web shop, or having a second set on the web shop, because then you're training players to go and visit the web shop every day to claim that reward. And okay, on day 1, they're probably just going to claim the reward and exit back out to the game. On day 2, they probably might just claim the reward, exit back to the game. But on day 3, they might go, actually, that's interesting. I hadn't seen that before. And then they start to explore. And by the time you get to kind of 5, 6, 7, they are in that habit of going, what's on the web shop today? So I think, yes, things like, all the normal web shop things like regional pricing, like being able to gift to other players. That's part of that community building, that when you have a true community, and we see it a lot in UGC, players will buy content for other players. And there's no expectation. There's no whatever. It's just like they've built these friendships and these relationships, and it's near Christmas. It's like, hey, I'm going to get you that little pet that you've wanted for the last 6 months or whatever. And we see that in UGC. We see it across the board. Gifting is one of the most used features across Minecraft, across 5M, across Rust. It's used across the board in UGC. And so those sorts of features, the gifting and creator codes. Again, we talked about wanting to engage with kind of streamers and influencers more. Creator codes is a feature that we see commonly on, say, Fortnite, the support creator program, and something that we have on Tebex for across the platform. It's available to UGC, it's available to PC, it's available to mobile. But these are things that, not just saying it's just that one IAP purchase, job done. You can using creator codes, using gifting, using these mechanisms to get people coming back, builds that community that we talked about. And that's the real aim here, is saving the whatever it will be. I think we all know at this point, as much as I don't think the proposed settlement is going to go through as is, I think we have to be realistic. Google and Apple are still going to get their piece. This isn't going to be free. I think anyone who says otherwise, I admire their optimism. So I think we know that's the case, but having that control and building that relationship with your community through a true web shop experience is what's going to kind of make the difference and really move the needle, not just now, but for the next 2, 5, 10 years.
I think that makes sense to be like, what can we do on the web shop that maybe is difficult to do in client, or is more community oriented than would make sense in client as well.
Yeah.
Or even just supporting beyond creator codes, just affiliate codes, right? Which is something that is difficult to do unless you're doing some in-game deep link thing, right? So it is interesting to look at it as a platform that can do more rather than just, hey, let's skip the 30% cut, try and get a little bit smaller, right? I think we're trying to move beyond that. And it's something you've mentioned to me probably as well, that's a big thing to think about, is moving beyond that mentality. And obviously that's nice, right? Making more money, especially for your company, making a lot of money, making a lot more money by getting rid of that, which of course, was some of Epic's motivation to begin with. But it is good to move beyond that.
Yeah, 100%. And I do think, I think you're right. I think that whole, the headline of you're going to make more money is brilliant. And don't get me wrong, that's a brilliant hook to be able to talk. Yeah, it's a good lead, right? To say to any studio, whether it's desktop, whether it's mobile, but hey, do you guys want to make more money? It's a great way to start a conversation, but it isn't the true end goal for us. That whole giving power back to these studios and giving that kind of that ownership, while still taking away the complexity, because that's the thing is, there are definitely studios that are obviously doing this themselves, and they're going to actually, we're going to run our own payment stack. We're going to do all our own optimization. We're going to handle all the tax and things. And that's great. I recently did a keynote at the Live Service Gaming Summit in London. And one of the things I said is, if I had a magic wand and I could put payments experts inside every studio, I would do. It would be brilliant. I would love it. The reality is that most studios are actually downsizing, right? Studios are getting smaller. They're not adding to headcount. We're seeing, these announcements of, having to make layoffs because of the state of the global economy right now. So being able to use something, like a merchant record partner, someone like a Tebex or whoever, to say, look, we will basically be that internal team that you never had to hire. And that's the thing that that's something that I love. I love thinking about this stuff. I love talking about this stuff, as I'm sure you've probably guessed. That we can be that extension to the studio. We can kind of advise on a lot of this stuff and be like, hey, this is how you can build these relationships, but the relationship is yours. It's not Tebex's, it's not whoever else, it is your relationship. And this is, I think that's this thing that, like I said, the headline's great for kind of starting the conversation, but actually breaking down hey, you can do the things you want to do. You can, have better relationships with these influencers and referral programs and affiliate codes and, abandoned baskets. One of those things, like if I cancel a purchase on mobile, it just goes, your purchase has been canceled. And I go, okay. Whereas, one of the things that we'll do is if you start going through the checkout and you bail out, we'll be like, hey, we saw you started, you didn't finish. Was there a problem? Can we tempt you back? Depending on the studio. And again, this is obviously per studio and whether they're comfortable with this. It might be hey, here's a small discount, or you go and finish your purchase now and you'll get a free extra bundle, or whatever it might be. So we do all those things that are are certainly not impossible to do in game, particularly mobile, but they're a lot harder. Whereas we can make that, and I think again, a lot of merchant record platforms and a lot of well-built web shops, such as Tebex's, make those things a lot easier. And we handle all the headaches and the heavy lifting and leave the studio to just keep building kick-ass content.
So, I mean, just getting into some more of the nitty-gritty details, like of trying to handle these sorts of payments outside of the payment rail systems, I'm kind of curious how you guys look at like subscriptions or some of this other games as a platform stuff, but especially subscriptions, because it's like normally that's handled by the payment rail system and there's like a centralized management for it that they could potentially have. Like there's a bit different approach than I think you guys probably can do on the sort of web platforms. How are you guys approaching subscriptions especially?
Yeah, and I think this is where kind of D2C really can shine, actually, because, again, we've talked about fees, we've talked about more control, we've talked about kind of that better lifetime value by building that kind of long-term relationship. You have that long tail of LTV. But I think the challenge that a lot of studios, something that we've spoken to, have faced, and I had this exact conversation where, a studio sort of said to me, like, we have like a battle pass thing, but like 80% of all subscriptions failed. And it kind of, we dug into it a little bit. And the reason was that for them, a lot of their players, because of their like advertising cycles, a lot of their players would start kind of just before payday effectively, which then meant they'd make the first purchase, it'll come to renew. And, as happens, you get to the end of the month, there's more months than money sometimes, right? And so, they'd try and renew the subscription and it would fail. And okay, then maybe a retry mechanism and it fail. And then it kind of gives up. Whereas, you can tailor a lot more because it's individually calibrated. You can say, well, actually, we're going to give a 10-day grace period because we know that a lot of players are then going to get paid and then the subscription is going to renew. And that's something where, when you've got a one size fits all, you have to kind of set the subscriptions, and these retry mechanisms do 100% exist. Google has this retry mechanism, Apple has this retry mechanism, but it has to kind of be configured in a way that works for like the majority, I suppose. Whereas rather than it being pinned down, like different countries, you have countries like in the UK and most of Europe being paid monthly, super normal. Other countries being paid weekly or bi-weekly, much more common. So understanding where your player base is and understanding kind of their unique kind of needs means that you're much more likely to keep that successful kind of subscription going. Again, continuing to build that loyalty, continue to build that lifetime value. And that's something that we really push. On top of that, obviously, having the right subscription methods. So in a lot of places, you still see, okay, well, you can subscribe with a card and PayPal, and that's about it. Whereas, South Korea, most people don't use a branded, like an internationally branded Visa card or MasterCard. Some of them have PayPal, but less so. A lot of them want to pay their subscriptions with NaviPay or TossPay or those sorts of things. Alipay in China. Again, this is what people use to pay for subscriptions. MirPay in Japan, for example. So definitely that whole, having the local subscriptions as well is super important. And it's something that, because that's what we specialize in. We specialize in understanding the payments kind of ecosystem. We specialize in understanding how a player in Brazil is different from a player in Europe, is different from a player in North America. And by age, a player in North America that's 16 is going to be very different from a player in North America that's 60. for example. And so understanding all those differences and that actually what's right for one cohort of players is going to be very, very different to what's right from another cohort of players is what taking this control back and understanding your community and understanding kind of your player base is really, really valuable, because it means you can make these things much more successful, continue to build that loyalty, that relationship, that LTV.
Yeah, so it's definitely nice that it's like a little not as one size fits all. Although I think there's an interesting flip side to that, because you made me think about Google's retrade mechanism, which was kind of interesting, is and very annoying sometimes as a customer, is if a payment fails, it will look at your other payment options that you've put into Google Pay and just be like, well, obviously you wanted to pay with a different one. We're not going to ask you. We're just going to charge you wherever we can, which is interesting because it's like, that isn't just for that game or that device. It goes across like, hey, I have a Google Workspace subscription, and then I have like game in-app subscriptions, and those are pulling from the same pool of payments. So like, I might have one that I'm like, yeah, definitely make sure you resubscribe to my Workspace, but I don't really care as much about a game. Suddenly, like if I'd put in, say, a privacy card for to use for the game, it's just gonna be like, well, that didn't work, but I'm gonna kick back to your Workspace card. So it's kind of interesting strategy-wise.
When you've got a company card attached to your account, you go,
right.
That was a mistake.
Suddenly you've got to explain to your boss so that why you need to pay off this receipt for an app purchase in your game. So, but it's just an interesting, like, flip side of that sort of one size fits all versus a customized thing, is they already have that pool of cards potentially in the Google Pay, whereas, and that's more of a subscription kind of thing rather than an in-app purchase thing. But it is an interesting sort of like flip side to that.
It is definitely. And I think, I mean, it brings on to an interesting point. And again, this is where, for Tebex particularly, obviously I plan to talk about Tebex in this example, where we want to make sure that everybody wins, right? When we say everybody wins, we genuinely mean everybody. Yes, we are here as an extension to the studio. We are here to have the studios back. This is why we have things like, chargeback protection. If as the merchant of record, if we sell something and there's a chargeback, we don't take the money from the studio. The studio keep their money. Like, we've already bought that content from the studio. They have that is rightfully theirs. We take the hit, and that will always be the case. We're never gonna move away from that, because we want to do what's right by the studio. But at the same time, we want to do what's right by the players as well. So, one of the things that we do, and yes, okay, you have to do this in certain regions, but we do it across the board because we think it's the right thing to do, is we will say 3 days before a subscription is due, hey, this subscription is due. This is how much it's going to be. This is where we're going to be taking it from. If you've got, if there are concerns, there are problems, let us know. Here's a button to manage it, whatever. And actually, as much as, the short-term thinking can sometimes be, but I want that subscription. I'd rather they realize after the subscription, that classic thing, and less so in kind of Europe, but I know in the States, and I've had subscriptions in the States where it's like a 60-step process to cancel a subscription or something. I think it's always been more natural for it to be easier in Europe, right? But we see that because, okay, there might be a short-term revenue loss, but you've kept them as a fan. I've had subscriptions where it has taken me so many times. I've had to make an international phone call to an office in the States to cancel something or whatever. And it's like, I am never using that product again. You could not pay me to use that product. I am done. They are dead to me. Whereas making it easier and making it kind of painless, they're still a fan of you, of your studio, of your game. Maybe it's just a temporary thing. Maybe it's like, actually, you know what? Christmas is coming up. I've got a bunch of gifts to buy. I can't do it this month. I'm going to resubscribe in January. You make it difficult and they go, that's it. I'm done. I'm going to find a different thing. So that whole, doing right by the player as well, actually is the best thing for the long-term partnership and the long-term kind of relationship between the game and the studio and the player and Tebex as well.
Yeah, as a personal anecdote that kind of supports what you're saying, especially about the reputational hit and things like that in terms of goodwill. I noticed, a lot of Black Friday deals come out for things that tend to be subscriptions, and they don't tend to resubscribe you at the Black Friday price. They'll resubscribe you at the full price, right? So on Black Friday, I got hit with multiple charges from things I had done the previous Black Friday and forgot about, and I was having to write a lot of emails, so I didn't try and bother with their normal process because they'd already charged me, because they didn't give me that heads up notice that you're talking about. So now they're going to have to deal with the potential backlash of that. And so I'm emailing all of them like, hey, you guys charged me. I like your product, but I can't purchase, I can afford it right now, especially since you charged me full price. Like, please refund me and cancel it. And, then I will definitely keep you in mind as soon as I can afford it again. Luckily, most of them were good about it. And in doing so and refunding it promptly and not dragging me through the model meds, I'm like, okay, I probably will consider, resubscribe to them. Had they dragged me through the mud, it would have been like, you guys will never see my money again.
Yeah,
and so I do think that does matter in that, especially if they're hoping to get full price and not a Black Friday purchase again. I think that does make a difference. But it is interesting with those sorts of situations where a lot of subscriptions tend to come with a first-time discount that doesn't renew. And if you don't give a heads up on that, you're really kind of asking for some backlash.
Yeah, and this is it. I think, like as I said, from a one of the unique things, because obviously we're based in the UK, you might have guessed, that we are used to this kind of slightly more regulatory heavy, I suppose. Kind of EU, kind of this is the right thing the right way to look after consumers, and like that has its pros and cons. GDPR was as much as it's a great thing now, it was a massive headache for everyone when it happened. And so, I guess in some ways for us, it's kind of second nature a little bit. It's like, well, no, of course we're not here to screw players over, just as we're not here to screw a studio. We are here to make sure everybody benefits and kind of wins in this relationship. And so, so for us, that's one of our very much our guiding principles. It's like, we are going to do what's right by everyone. Because that's how you build a long-standing kind of loyal player base, not I'm going to play it for 5 minutes and then drop it for the next thing.
Makes sense. When it comes to a lot of changes you've seen over time, obviously you guys have been around since, this early stage of like Minecraft support and things like that, building into a more robust thing. And studios are kind of having to go through some of that evolution themselves, right? As this becomes more of a thing and become more of a legal option as well. What kind of advice or thinking would you want to give studios for sort of future-proofing or thinking about the future of this stuff? Because it's probably not the end of changes, right? Like this stuff will continue to evolve for better or worse, especially if somehow crypto gets involved and gets even crazier. But I just mean, like, how would you advise studios to think about this, to approach this, to prepare for other potential changes, and maybe even backpedaling and going back on this stuff?
So one of the things that I say a lot, and I say it also to our kind of UGC, our game servers, is don't think in terms of products and bundles and packages. Think about the ecosystem. Because you're right, even within, like, let's say that D2C stays. We know that in Europe, for example, next year, there's almost certainly going to be new rules around like loot boxes and that whole mechanism. There's already been pressure, right? A few years ago, EA had to change there so you can see what was in the loot box, etc. That's going to change again. Like, these things are going to continue to become more kind of pared down and regulated. So if you kind of build your whole strategy around what you're going to sell, that's where you are going to come unstuck. Because the minute that changes, you have to change your entire model. Whereas if you think ecosystem, you think actually players being involved and kind of UGC and games as a platform, and how can we use this IP in new ways, and how do we build a loyal player base and a loyal fan base so that actually it doesn't, to a degree, it doesn't matter what the specifics that they are buying are, because they want to support us. They want to buy, whether it's whether it's kind of new new pets that have no impact on gameplay, whether it's, kind of coins for a particular, mini game, whether it's an XP boost or whatever it might be. They want to support us. They love our game. They understand that for us to keep doing this, we have to be viable. And that's kind of building that ecosystem and that kind of that player base and that fan base is really, really important. The other thing that I will say is just, a lot of times studios will go, well, we'll worry about what's happening now, and we'll worry about the future in the future. And I get it, because there's a lot of moving parts. You get to crunch time. It's like, this has got to get out the door. There are investors, there's publishers, there's, whatever. I get it. But be aware that you kind of have to look at what's on the horizon. Gaming is global. And that the fact that gaming is global is the very best thing, because it means you have such a diverse and wonderful player base of people that are enthusiastic and love what you do. But at the same time, it means you are exposing yourself to global tax. You're exposing yourself to global consumer regulations. You're exposing yourself to players who have different expectations. We had an interesting story recently where we had feedback personally at Tebex that players in Thailand didn't feel or didn't enjoy our support process. And so we did some research into this. We were like, okay, and a lot of companies would be like, oh, it's one country, it's works everywhere else. We're not going to worry about it. And we're like, no, we want to get to the bottom of this. And what we did a kind of a bunch of research. We spoke to people we know, and obviously we had friends that are kind of Thai nationals and things, and we reached out to them. And it turns out that in Thailand, they do not want any pleasantries. They just literally want, here's my problem, here's the response, done. We thought we were being we were doing what we'd normally do. We were kind of, I guess, over-serving in a way and being really pleasant and kind of being really supportive in the way that we do. We want to be supportive. We want to look after every single player on that buys something from Tebex. But because of their expectations were different, we were missing the mark. And so we kind of went and actually we took a time and understood their expectations and their needs, and now how we handle those requests now is very, very different. So this is the great thing about it, right? But the challenges, like I said, are around, understanding your global tax exposure. In the States, for example, you don't collect sales tax. You hit Nexus in, say, Texas, which is 200 transactions. They could be $201 transactions. You still hit Nexus. And they can look back, I think it's 7 years, and the penalties can be 200% of the tax amount, and they charge you interest. It's crazy scary. You don't want to be getting into that. So actually looking ahead and kind of seeing what is on the horizon and get advice, whether that's an accountant, whether that's a specialist tax authority, whether that is a merchant of record. Get advice on those things, understand what consumer regulations are in those other markets, understand what the tax exposures might be. And make sure you've got that flexibility, as we talked about. Cards and PayPal, great in North America, great in most of Europe. But even in, say, Europe, like in the Netherlands, Pix for us is 68.5% of all transactions. That's like a bank-to-bank method. In Germany, cards are I think it's sub 10%. I can't remember these. I think it's 8 point something, but it's sub 10% of payments in Germany are on cards. Everything else is wallets. So some of that's PayPal, some of that's used to be SoFort and is now Klarna. But it's very much those that they don't use cards. Brazil, another brilliant example. Even 3 or 4 years ago, Boleto, over-the-counter payments was the thing. And everyone's like, Brazil was always going to be a cash-first society. Everyone's going to go to the local place and pay for their Boleto. In a few short years, Pix is 90% of transactions, and I think we see 2 Boleto transactions.
Wow.
It's completely, it's changed, but you have to know what's on the horizon and know these things are coming, because otherwise you'll suddenly find when this shift happens, if 10% of your player base is in Brazil and you're not offering Pix, you've just lost 10% of your revenue. So you have to be on top of these things.
Well, speaking of being on top of things and the horizon, what do you personally see, say, over the next 2 years? I don't want to go too far. 5 years was originally going to ask, and I'm like, this changes way too fast to ask 5 years. Just in the next 2 years, since legislation does take time and things like that, what do you see kind of coming for? Obviously not hey, absolutely, this is where the puck's going, skate there. But, things to keep an eye on at the very least.
I think actually the proposed settlement from in the States between Epic and Google is the first hint. So I think we will see kind of a more unified, standardized set of this is the expectations. We've seen it in other industries before. Oftentimes the US, will set a standard on something, and a lot of the world will align to that. We see it in air travel, for better or worse. We see it in various other industries as well. So I think that's what we're going to see. I think, as I said, we are collectively coming to the realization that Google and Apple aren't just going to say, okay, we're not going to take any fees anymore. That's not going to happen, just categorically. So I think we recognize that now. I think, from this settlement, I think that's the wake-up call that everyone kind of was waiting for, to go, well, okay, I don't think they're going to end up at that tier. I think it's quite clear that, the judge in that case has turned around and said, well, I think maybe we need to look at this again. But that fee is going to be that. And I think we will see, some of these other countries, like I said, India, apparently kind of their kind of economic, I can't remember the name of the department, the economic fairness, the fair trade commission are looking at it right now. Same in Brazil. Obviously, Australia have ruled that what Google was doing was unfair, but they haven't set kind of the repercussions for that yet. So I think what we are going to see is once the US kind of has more clarity, I think we will see a lot of these other countries align more closely. The EU may do its own thing because it's the EU and they always do. But I think broadly, we're going to see that alignment. And so I think at that point, again, all the things we've talked about, the narrative of this save 30% isn't going to apply. It is going to be, this is how you grow that loyalty, that LTV. And I think that's what we will see. I think we're going to see a lot more cross-platform games as platforms. As I talked about, that's something that I'm really excited for over the next few years. We're already seeing examples, Arc is a really good example. And obviously saying that obviously I know closely because Overwolf and Tebex worked a lot on it, that it was the first game that allowed kind of real kind of third-party modding in an official capacity. That took a hell of a lot of work, working with Sony, working with Microsoft to do these things was really, really a lot of work. And to get them on board and understand this is how mods are going to be cooked. This is how mods are going to be distributed. This is how we're going to ensure that they're not going to cause problems with those consoles because those ecosystems are very tightly controlled. But this cross-platform, PC, mobile, console, and UGC kind of games as platforms ecosystem and this shared economic model, which is, like I said, something that we've been doing a lot. And I definitely see that being a key factor in the next kind of iteration of gaming over the next the next 2 years, but also the next 5 years as well.
Cool. Well, hopefully the good parts at the very least are accurate. But we'll see. As you said, like a lot of stuff needs to get settled and then percolate across the globe. Like you said,
exactly.
The global part is both good and bad, right? And everyone will probably do things maybe slightly different, but hopefully enough that people can manage. But that's where you're here to help, right? To help people kind of figure that out.
And this is where, exactly. And again, I mean, GDPR again is a good example of that, where, the EU have their GDPR thing. And then, in the US, there's obviously slightly more fragmented, but certain states have their own data protection things, which some of them are kind of akin to GDPR, some of them are a little bit different. Canada has its own thing, which has been kind of considered parity to GDPR, but it still has its nuances. Australia's is a bit different again. Obviously, the UK, post-Brexit, we've decided to do our own thing as well. So, and this is exactly that keeping on top of all this stuff is a lot of work. This is why Tebex doesn't build games, right? We wouldn't, I would love to. I'd love to be able to build games, but I wouldn't have the time. And we have a fantastic team and a really big team of people that their entire life is like, okay, what's coming over the horizon? What's the next thing? What's the next thing in regulations? What's the next thing in data protection? What's the next thing in consumer protection? What's the next thing in, all of these different things in payments and everything else? Because that's what we can do. We can support studios, and we, as I said, we think of ourselves as the in-house team you never had to hire, because we are always there kind of having kind of the studios back and be like, hey, this is the next thing. We've got it. You don't need to worry about it. You carry on doing your great thing. You carry on bringing the magic. We'll deal with all the nuts and bolts. And I think that is, having someone, whether it's in-house, whether it's, a merchant record like Tebex, having someone who literally is there to keep an eye on the nuts and bolts and be ahead of the curve on that stuff means that you don't have to stress about it. It doesn't have to keep you up at night. You can be like, hey, we've got this brilliant game. Let's keep doing this. Let's keep building that audience. Let's keep building that fan base. This is the thing that we do. You deal with the nuts and bolts. And that, I think, works really well.
Nice. Well, we just got to keep on doing what you're doing then. We're gonna wrap things up with just a quick rapid fire set of 3 questions here. Feel free to be controversial or spicy without having to explain yourself, just to keep it interesting to, make it worth listening to the end here. But we're just gonna go over those real quick. First one being, and this doesn't have to be a Tebex one, but feel free. The best implementation of a web shop you've seen personally. It doesn't have to be recent, but just in general, the ones like this is a solid web shop.
I am going to use a Tebex example, but Dawn of Ages by Boombit, mobile game. The experience is so seamless. You really don't know that the difference. I have very little to do with it because I have no artistic talent to save my life. But the team that did, you genuinely don't know the difference between game and web shop, which is awesome.
Nice. Well, the flip side of that, biggest mistake you constantly see web shops making, the one that's like, come on, guys.
See, I've got 2. I don't know which one to use. Okay. treating Webshops as a discount channel. This is the thing, because again, we talked about retraining players, and everyone goes, "Hey, we're going to take 25% off of all our products on the web shop." Okay, so you've just lost margin. You can build the player base. Great. Adding value instead of discounting is the big thing. Unique experiences that you can't get kind of in game. Same things as we talk about on Black Friday. But yeah, treating web shops as a discount channel, not a premium channel. Biggest mistake I ever see, and it makes me cry every time.
Nice. And outside of the sort of Google v. Epic and Epic v. Apple and all that, is there any pending lawsuits or legislation or just anything in that sort of realm that you think will have a big impact, that like a specific one as opposed to just like the broader shifts?
Yeah, I would say kind of the EU ramping up enforcement of the Digital Markets Act. I think, and the other ancillary bits around loot boxes and things that are all being tacked onto that. I think that's going to have a big impact because for most games, it's the second biggest market after North America. So you would then get to this thing, do we build two experiences or do we coalesce experiences around the most strictest implementation?
Yeah, I guess we had the whole thing that Supercell was pushing back against too, with the whole like getting rid of microtransactions altogether. What? It's like, we'll see where things go with the EU. Who likes to kick it around.
Supposedly, it's going to, hopefully, it's going to work for old school RuneScape. So
there you go. That's the only thing that matters, right? Most important. Old school for a reason. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you stopping by here, Liam. Definitely a lot of cool stuff going on, a lot of shifting in the industry, which you guys are hopefully staying on top of. It sounds like day-to-day basis at this point. So I imagine we'll speak to you guys in the future here as well and be like, what were we thinking back then? It's so different now. So we'll see.
That didn't age well.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully your predictions were at least hedged enough to just to kind of be correct. So we'll see.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, but thanks again for stopping by. I really appreciate it, and of course to the audience as well for tuning in. Hopefully to the entire episode here, and we'll look forward to catching you guys on the next one. And in the meantime, enjoy the new year.
If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, or give a 5-star review. And if you want to reach out or provide feedback, shoot us a note at podcast@naavik.co or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn more about what Naavik has to offer, make sure to check out our website, www.naavik.co. There, you can sign up for the #1 games industry newsletter, Naavik Digest, or contact us to learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services. Again, that is www.naavik.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.